All right, so now for this one, we've got cosine of theta equals -7/8, and then it asks us if theta is in quadrant 3, what is the value of tangent? So basically, when it says if it is in quadrant 3, remember that when we do all this angle business, this is 0 degrees. All right, so we're going to rotate counterclockwise, but this is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3. So that means my reference angle is going to be like here. Or this is my right triangle, and this is the angle theta. Okay. So if I pull that out of the quadrant, I'm going to have something that looks like this. Now remember, this point here has an x, comma, y. But really, when you think about it, the x is the adjacent and the y is the opposite. But in quadrant 3, guess what? Both the adjacent and the opposite are negative. And the hypotenuse, so this is the hypotenuse, the side across from the angle theta is the opposite, and then this is the adjacent. The adjacent and the opposite are both negative. So if I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So this is my adjacent. This is my opposite. And this is the hypotenuse. So when it says cosine is equal to -7/8, I could write it as -7/8, or I could write it as +7/8. Well, remember that that is equal to cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Now, if you can't remember what's what, always remember SOHCAHTOA, right? SOHCAHTOA. And what that means is sine is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. Cosine is equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And tangent is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. So I'm going to say since the adjacent is negative, that it should be this. In other words, my adjacent is -7, and my hypotenuse is 8. Now to find the opposite, we're going to do the Pythagorean Theorem. The opposite plus the adjacent, the opposite squared plus the adjacent squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So then the opposite squared plus -7 squared is equal to 8 squared. The opposite plus 49, because -7 times -7 is a positive 49. And all that stuff is equal to 8 squared, which is 64. I'm going to subtract 49 from both sides. And I get the opposite squared is equal to 49. 25 minus 49. I think it's 15. Yeah, it's 15. I was going to pull out my calculator, and then I was like, no. So now to find the actual opposite, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Remember that when you do that, you have to consider the positive and negative. So really the opposite is equal to plus or minus the square root of 15. Well, how do I figure out whether it's positive or negative? Based on the value of x. So the opposite is definitely going to be negative. So then this is negative the square root of 15. Let me slide this over and make a little room here. So that's that. Now, what they want us to find out, though, is what is tangent? What is the value of tangent? Well, remember when we use so, ka, toa, the toa part means that tangent t, tangent of theta, is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. While the opposite is negative 15, negative root 15 over the adjacent, which is negative 7. Now the negatives will cancel out, so I get the square root of 15 all over 7. And that's it on that one.